And it's just, I guess I wanted to start this by recognizing as well just the importance of Human Rights Day and this idea. You know, it's as we work to support human rights defenders that are constantly being threatened from government sources, from paramilitary groups, from businesses, from global development, from all of these different things. They're facing a whole, host of different challenges. And the issue here of respecting the space for civil society, of respecting, the ability of open society to exist, I think is something that we really have to recognize, especially when you look at, hello.
Hi.
It's interesting, I guess, in terms of the news, or it's in today's newspaper about the CIA report that's come out about abuse coming from the United States. And what was really interesting to me about that report is that there isn't anything particularly new in that. We've all heard about, we've all heard about waterboarding before. We've heard about black sites. We've heard about, rendition flights and all of these sort of things. But what was, I think, crucially important to that is that it was drawing a line underneath that and saying, look, we recognize that these things have happened. And I think when we look back over the last 15 years since September 11th and the amount of ground that has been given in terms of respect for human rights and in terms of respect for the space for civil society to exist, I think it's crucial to recognize what has been lost in this so-called war on terror. And what I'm not an expert on these, I'm not somebody with a legal background or anything, but I think it is what we're seeing, what I've been with Frontline for the last 10 years, and what we have seen are, the blunt end of that, the blunt end of this, of this issue of human rights defenders being faced with, being challenged by governments that are able to act with impunity. We are taking up cases from, we work with human rights defenders in about 162 countries. And the number of human rights defenders that are killed each year has increased, while about 10% of those cases are actually result in any kind of activity going against those that have disappeared them or killed them. So I just think in that context, I think it's important to recognize the crucial value of this. So one of the, I guess going in a little bit into Frontline's work, and to give you a sense of how we operate. So the organization was started in 2001, and it was started by a woman named Mary Lawler, who first started Amnesty Ireland. And she left Amnesty Ireland because she wanted to focus directly on rapid, practical support for at-risk human rights defenders. Now, what exactly is an at-risk human rights defender? So human rights defenders that we support are journalists, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they are, local farmers, they're indigenous, they're regular people, they're LGBT activists. They might be people from small communities. They are coming from a whole host of different places, and they are being confronted by basically the group of people that are too stubborn to actually step aside when faced with challenges to their communities. And they're facing a whole host of different challenges. They're facing defamation. They're being disappeared. Many of the people we work with have been killed. They're facing spurious charges. They're facing judicial proceedings against them that are designed to limit what they're able to do. And what Frontline does is we try to react in a rapid, practical way to give them support. So how do we do this? So the organization operates on a 24/7 basis. You can call us, 24 hours a day in Arabic, English, Spanish, French, and Russian, and say, this has happened. My family has been threatened. I got a note on the door. XYZ situation has occurred, and I need some support. And Frontline is there then to provide whatever support we can. And it's not always a perfect situation for us. It's not something we can always succeed at, but we are working to provide whatever support we can. And we do that through a number of different ways. We have protection staff that are based in each of the world regions. So we have somebody based supporting human rights defenders in former Soviet Union, Central Asia. We've got somebody in Asia. We've got somebody in Nairobi supporting sub-Saharan African human rights defenders, Middle East, North Africa, Latin America. And they're basically working out of with a mobile phone and a laptop, and they're constantly traveling and networking with human rights defenders throughout the world and trying to get a sense of what are the challenges that they're facing? What are the trends that are developing that are restricting their ability to support their communities? They're also able to find out more about the individual defenders and their communities, their organizations, so that if another human rights defender from their community calls us, we're able to know very quickly who that person is and get a sense of the credibility of their claim, and we're able to react quickly, you know, because it's very important for us to be able to vet who exactly is calling us. Now, so what we do at that point is we can provide support through a number of different ways. And so the organization can provide support through lobbying with the European Union. We have an office set up in Brussels, where we're working to raise awareness and practical support for human rights defenders to the European Union itself, and as well through individual member states. So say somebody calls us from, say they're in Mombasa. For example, I'll give you an example. There's a woman named Phyllis Amido in Mombasa, she spoke out on behalf of her community where there was a heavy metals plant that was dumping chemicals into the water supply, and kids were getting sick. You know, it's this sort of right out of what was the movie? Erin Brockovich. It was a similar kind of thing. In fact, they always call her the M. Brockovich of Mombasa. But it was that kind of scenario where she was speaking out about heavy metal being dumped in and people were getting sick, and nobody was hearing, you know, exactly, you know, the government was not responding properly to the point where she was actually being threatened. So she called Frontline, and we were able to then take up her case to the European Union. The European Union and the individual member states are there with various embassies that are in Kenya, are able to then, you know, speak to the Kenyan government and say, look, we are aware that this is happening. And they are able to apply pressure on behalf of her case. So there are a whole legal proceedings. Other things that Frontline was doing is we're providing legal support for her. And giving her financial support so she could employ a lawyer. Now her case is still going on, and she's still working on this issue to this day. Third thing we're able to do is provide visibility for us to raise international awareness for that particular case. Now there are a few other things that Frontline will do as well. The sort of the single largest program aspect of what we do is we provide security grant assistance for human rights defenders, which means that they can call us and we can turn around very quickly grants of about up to €7,500 for things like you know, bars on windows, reinforced doors, legal support, medical support. We do quite a bit of temporary relocation. So if somebody is in trouble and they are facing an immediate threat, we can get them out. And we have a visa program set up with the Irish government, so we can do fast-track visas and actually bring them to Ireland and get around a lot of the challenges that typically they would face in getting to another country or getting out of that particular country. But the goal is to keep them there, is to keep them, maybe move them domestically, but to keep them working on the issues that they're doing. If they leave and say they go for asylum or something, they're no longer working on the issues that they're there to promote. Now, so it's an interesting one. With that point, you know, it's so few of the human rights defenders that have actually come to Ireland or that we have supported through temporary relocation, a tiny fraction of them ever actually gone after or requested asylum. I mean, they all want to go back and keep working on their issues. These guys are hugely dedicated to their work. So through the security grants program, last year we allocated about €900,000 to about 350 human rights defenders in about 68 different countries. So it's you know, as we say, unfortunately, business is booming, and more people are coming to us for this type of support. So other things that we can provide are, we do a lot of training support to increase capacity of human rights defenders to promote legitimate social change. So the training that we're doing is on personal security and risk assessment. So going back to that call, so another example would be one of our human rights defenders literally received on her door, a bloody doll was tacked to her door, and it listed the name of her daughter, and, you know, and there was a threat to stop her work. You can imagine what your reaction might be to that. So we were able to support her not only through temporary relocation support for herself and for her daughter, but we're also able to provide training on, this goes back to the idea of the training that we're providing is, what is the nature of that threat? So in this case, that's an extreme example, but if you get a letter in the middle of the night, is this something, what is the level of that threat? If you can understand what that threat is, how to address that. Is this something where I need to react right now, or are they trying to scare me? If I can get some system of assessing what that threat is, I can reduce my anxiety level, I can reduce my stress, I can think rationally. I can stay working, ideally, for longer. So the threat is put in a box, essentially. Now what we're doing is working with security. Then what they're doing is devising security plans around that. So some of the things we might talk about are who else do you know? Who is in your network? If I receive that threat, what do I do? What is my reaction? How am I going to respond to that? And they're working on security plans then to come up with their community or come up with their peers, or perhaps if they're working in an organization, what does the organization do? Now another side of that would be digital security support. Huge increase. I mean, I want to get into trends quickly. I feel like I'm going on forever. I was throwing out my notes and I'm just talking. Is digital security has been we've seen a huge increase in the need for digital security among human rights defenders. So all this Edward Snowden stuff that's come out over the last couple of years, that's very unsettling for all of us. And what does this mean in terms of surveillance of our lives and government intervention of our lives? For human rights defenders, that results a lot of people we work with in literally a knock on your door. I mean, if we were working with a Syrian defender a few years ago who his conversation, he was in with us in Dublin, I was talking about what exactly the situation. And he said, if they take your phone, they're able to, he said, you will quickly give them your passwords because you're not, he said, all this talk about resisting torture, he said, it doesn't happen. You will tell them the information you need to share to get out of that situation. So if you have all that information on your phone, immediately all the contact information for all of your network is exposed. So other lives are in danger. And even beyond that, the work that you've tried, the efforts that you've undertaken to promote civil society is going to be undermined in a huge way. We have a defender actually in Vietnam who ran into this situation where he had 2 laptops. He had one for work and one for his personal use. And he went on vacation, and his daughter was taking pictures. And she kept saying, Dad, come on, I want to send the pictures up, send them to my friends. So finally he said, all right, you can do that. He allowed her to plug her phone into his work computer. Her phone was compromised, and with that then, they were able to access all of his information on his personal computer. His entire network is exposed. He had to leave the country. People's lives were threatened. It was a terrible situation. This is somebody who'd been through one of our trainings already, and even tiny little slip-ups like that. So we're constantly providing training on digital security. And then I guess the other aspects that we're working on are promoting network and communication, leadership between human rights defenders themselves. We have a big event down in Dublin called the Dublin Platform, and we pulled people, about 100 human rights defenders. We do this every other year. They come together for 3 days. And they all meet in Dublin, and they are sharing with one another, learning. There's testimonies, there's panel discussions on specific issues like LGBT rights, specific challenges that women human rights defenders are facing, digital security, what the European Union can do to support human rights defenders. All these different topics, they're able to finally get a chance to meet face-to-face with representatives from the international community and then between themselves. And the amazing thing is it's all very, it's an unbelievable group of people. It's very stark. They're providing testimony, say, for 3 to 5 minute testimonies. Countless stories like some of these that I've just shared. And then at the end of it, we have a party. We actually go to the Jameson's distillery, and we all have dinner. And it is unbelievable because they have the Irish band playing, And it's not like it's not like there's loads of drink taken or anything, but the energy in the room, suddenly they start off, and they're used to playing to tourists, and all of a sudden this whole group just is up dancing because they're all going to be going back the next day to the challenges that they're facing. We've done it 3 different years with 3 completely different groups of people, and every time the reaction is the same, which is just this unbelievable celebration of being alive in that moment and and the challenges that they're facing. So it's an interesting place to be. 3 trends that we're dealing with. I'm not sure how long I've been talking here. I should have looked at the clock. 3 trends that we've been dealing with. I mentioned digital security. 2 other trends. A third of the cases that we're taking up right now are with extractive industries, environmental impact, land grab issues. It's local communities that are being moved in countries all over the world away from their traditional form of livelihood, their traditional economy. They're being moved off their land, oftentimes with no warning. And this opens up a whole host of different challenges. If people have been, not everybody has a deed for their property. So suddenly they will show up and say, well, prove to us that you own, you know, that particular land where your farm has been for the last 4 generations, and nobody can, or however many generations. And it's a huge issue, and it's one that we've been startled to see how rapidly it's increasing. So we're talking about land grabs in Cambodia. We've seen land grabs and dealt with human rights defenders dealing with land grab issues in Burma. You know, multinational, state-sponsored multinational projects in South America and Guatemala. You know, it goes on and on. It really is happening everywhere. The other thing that we're seeing is restrictive legislation, and this has been, it's like any virus, it's spreading because it's effective. So Russia, as a lot of you may know, passed a law called the Foreign Agents Law, which any organization that's working to support human rights issues and which receives any kind of funding from overseas has to register and is deemed as a foreign agent and are put under a huge amount of restriction. In fact, they're not allowed to receive the funding, and often, most of the time, they run out of business. They're also facing spurious legal charges for the work that they're doing as a result of this. But we're seeing restrictive legislation most famously was just past month in Egypt, you know, and, you know, organizations were given, you know, something like 20 days to register. And if they have any kind of meeting involving more than 10 people, that has to be registered in advance. We've seen the same thing again in Cambodia. So this is happening time and time and time again. And it's a very effective way to limit the amount of international support for any organization. Foreign, you know, non-national organizations are then having to shut their doors and leave. So if we're talking about the big picture again, about promoting civil society of human rights, there's a massive, massive impact. It works, unfortunately, very well. And then I guess the third one I mentioned was digital security. But I guess before I finish, there was one quote I did have, which I think is amazing. And this is a guy, Dr. Mudam Ibrahim Adam, and he actually won the first Frontline Defenders Award. He's from Sudan. And his organization is called Sudo, and they work for the welfare and the rights of Sudanese people. And Mudawi has been arrested and he's been charged with espionage. He was arrested on his way to Dublin to pick up the Frontline Award. This goes back 10 years ago. He's been in prison 7 times. He's been held in police stations and prisons on open ground in freezing, wet, windy conditions without any shelter. He's been in solitary confinement. He's been tortured. He's faced trumped-up charges, some of which would carry the death penalty. He has sacrificed a lot, and he was actually up in Dublin with us just last year. He's unbelievable as an individual. And this is what he says, though. He says, "I think we have no choice. If we want to live a decent life in our country, we have to continue working with people, struggling with them. We are struggling to make change. We need the support of the international community. We need to feel that there are people behind us. It is a moral support. It is not tangible, but it has deep meaning in the heart. It has something, even when you close your eyes. You can see people you haven't seen. You can imagine their shapes, but they're holding your hand continually." And that's the kind of thing that keeps Frontline doing what it does, is the human rights defenders that are out there in all these different situations need international support for their work. And so that's what we're doing. So that's it.